Well, hey, Mission Hills, it's too late to say Merry Christmas because Christmas is over. It's too early to say Happy New Year because we're not quite there. We're in that in-between stage, and we're taking the weekend off from live services. And the reason for that is, honestly, Christmas Eve is just really intense.
Yeah.
Right? Just a little behind the scenes thing. A lot of times with the staff, we talk about both Christmas Eve and Easter as our Super Bowl events, because they just require a tremendous outlay of energy. And so it's kind of all hands on deck for staff, whereas most businesses, Christmas is the time that people start taking off, and you don't expect them to be in the offices as much and that kind of a thing. Christmas Eve is exactly the opposite for us. It's kind of all hands on deck. Everybody's expected to be there, and they're putting in extra hours. We ask the staff to do additional shifts beyond their normal work hours, even if they're not weekend staff, because there are staff that their main focus is weekend services, but then there are staff that we typically don't expect them to do much during the weekends because their job is more midweek kinds of things. But Christmas Eve, that all changes, and so everybody's expected to do a certain number of shifts and put in extra hours. And so we expect we'll probably see more than 10,000 people this Christmas Eve between our 4 campuses. And that just it requires a lot of effort on the part of our staff and serve team. And so rather than asking the staff and the serve team to come back and do it again just a couple of days later, we take that weekend off. Right. And that's new for us, right?
Yeah,
you remember our last church?
Yeah,
that's not what we would have done, right?
Right. In smaller church contexts or different ones, you may only do 1 or 2 or 3 maybe services for Christmas Eve, but we do 7. So
at the Littleton campus.
At the Littleton campus, and then additional ones at the other campuses as well. So it just looks a little bit different and takes a little bit more to make it happen. So we want to be kind to our staff and our serve team and give them, God always, when I'm always so refreshed and reminded when He asks us to push hard, that He gives us rest and restoration at the end. So we want to really model that for our staff and our serve team.
Yeah. And we want to be able to hit the ground running at the beginning of the new year because God's got great things in store, and that again is going to require the staff to be at their full capacity. So if you ever wondered why do we take the weekend off, it is not because anybody is lazy. It is because everybody is exhausted, and we're trying to model what the Lord tells us about taking Sabbath, taking rest, and resting so that we can engage in the work that God's called us to, right? It's not just resting from what's happened. It's also resting for everything else that God has for us. So a little bit different today. We're not doing a full service, but we did want to share some thoughts from God's Word. Specifically, I wanted to share some thoughts from God's Word that are about this in-between week. It's not quite the new year, but you're also kind of wrapping up the old year. And so Coletta and I have not rehearsed this, and so we're not even entirely sure how this is going to go. But I want to read through a story from the book of Joshua, and then we'll talk about a couple of pieces along the way. And my hope is that in this story, God will speak to you about maybe some practices to put into your life, or at the very least, some practices that you might want to engage in this particular in-between week, between the Christmas Eve and Easter period. So this is the story of the crossing of the Jordan. And so, just quick background, Israel has gotten to the edge of the promised land, and they're about to go in. To do that requires crossing the Jordan River. Now, the generation that refused to trust God, even after all they had seen with the parting of the Red Sea and the miracles in the wilderness and what God did in Egypt, but they still refused to go in to the promised land because they were afraid. God said, okay, well, you're not going to go in, you're going to die in the desert. And so they wandered in the desert for many, many years, and they had eventually passed. And that's where we pick up the story. It's this next generation that's getting to go in. Yeah. And I'm going to put my glasses on because the lighting here is different than the stage, and my eyes are not what they used to be. So that says, so when the people broke camp to cross the Jordan, the priest carrying the Ark of the Covenant went ahead of them. Now, the Jordan is at flood stage all during the harvest, which is important because the Jordan is actually not a particularly deep river in most places, and so crossing it wouldn't be a huge effort. But in this particular case, it was at flood stage, and so it was deeper, it was wider, it was a little bit more of a difficult crossing. And yet, as soon as the priest who carried the ark reached the Jordan and their feet touched the water's edge, the water from upstream stopped flowing. It piled up in a heap a great distance away, and at a town called Adam in the vicinity of Zarathan, That by the way, those names, that's when the glasses come in really handy. Right? The rest of it I'm pretty good with. But while the water was flowing down to the Red Sea of Arabah, that is the Dead Sea, was completely cut off. And so the people crossed over opposite Jericho. And the priests who carried the Ark of the Covenant of the Lord stopped in the middle of the Jordan, and they stood on dry ground, while all of Israel passed by until the whole nation had completed the crossing on dry ground. Quick first impressions of that. What do you think?
Yeah, it reminds me of the last time they crossed a big body of water and came out on dry ground in the middle, right?
Yeah, it's a really similar miracle. And it's similar not only in the sense of what actually happened, but I think probably in the sense of what's going on, right?
Yeah.
They've got enemies they're facing. Now, for Israel crossing the Red Sea, it was primarily, it was an enemy behind them. Egypt had come up behind them, and they were stuck at the edge of the Red Sea. In this case, it's probably more enemies in front of them because they're crossing, I don't know if you caught it, but they're crossing in front of Jericho or opposite Jericho.
Right.
So that was their big scary enemy. So instead of behind them, they've got an enemy in front of them. But it's the same thing. We've got a big enemy. The enemy feels bigger than us. We're not sure how to handle this. And in both cases, you have this parting of the Red Sea, or parting of a body of water, right? Parting the Red Sea and the parting of Jordan. And I found myself thinking, it's probably an important reminder to another generation that God can make a way. But just like the Red Sea, God makes a way and they have to walk in it, right?
Right.
And I wonder if what's going on here is simply this idea that this generation, maybe they haven't seen God make a way in the same way. They haven't seen him make a way in such a miraculous fashion. And so as they're getting ready to go in and face all they're going to have to face, God has to let them know, I'm going to do that. And it's a graciousness of God, right? Which tells me something about maybe even the previous generation. And I wonder if the previous generation had really explained to them, here's what God did, here's what God has done, here's what God can do, which necessitated God going, I need to show them, right?
Right.
I wonder about that. And which makes me think, as people who have seen God move in a variety of ways, do we consider it our responsibility, and do we take the responsibility seriously to pass on the story of what God has done to the younger generation? And again, we haven't rehearsed this, but I was wondering, like, even in our family, not necessarily traditions that we do or things like that, but like, how have we, as I look back, how have we passed on to our kids the stories of the fact that God can make a way?
Yeah.
Anything come to mind?
Right. So in our early years, when I think about when the kids were little, I think we were intentional about not only telling them stories from Scripture about when God did this, and this is what he did for the Israelites, but I think even more telling them stories about what God has done in our lives to make sure that even in the context of before they were born, this is what God did to provide for me, or to answer my prayer, or to guide me, or to shepherd me when I was just feeling directionless. But even in the context of our family, when we didn't know what next steps were, to really point their eyes toward, we're asking God for direction, and we're going to listen, and we're going to expect that he's going to lead.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, we did do that a lot. It sounds churchy, but it was our testimony, right?
Yeah.
I think sometimes in the church, I grew up in the church. You grew up in the church, but it was a very different kind of church, right? In the church context that I grew up in, people talked a lot about their testimony, but their testimony was always how I got saved, right? It wasn't, this is what I've seen God done.
Or is doing right now in me, like helping me with a struggle. Like, I'm struggling to forgive this person, and God is helping me walk through all the things that are involved with laying down anger and my right to bitterness, or whatever that looks like. But it's so current that, and what's happening here in this passage is, it's happening right now. We need to look back to what God has done in the past, but what is God doing in this moment, helping our kids really notice God's hand at work in our lives.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, our testimony is much bigger than how we got saved.
Yeah.
And it's much bigger than here's the things God has done in the past. It is that sense that if it's true that God is always with us and he's always working to bring good out of all circumstances for those who love him and are called according to his purposes, then we probably have an obligation to be asking that question, what is God doing now?
Right.
And it may not be as dramatic as some of the things in the past that we remember,
right.
but that doesn't mean it's any less miraculous, right?
Right. Can I just interject something that I think the sticking point here that's hardest, and if both of us are really honest, we want to be sharing with our kids what God is doing right now, today in my life, but if I am not seeking out and carving out time with him and inviting him into the hard spaces, I'm not going to have a story to tell. No. And I'm going to rely on stories that happened a long time ago that they've already heard. And it's I think it's a way, it's a tender mercy from God that he gives us this accountability. In order to have a story of his faithfulness, we've got to be inviting him in to those hard spaces and trusting him to do what only he can do.
And to your point, and reflecting on what God is doing. You know, we talk about spending time with him, and I think in what we call evangelical circles, that means I've spent time reading scripture and then praying some prayers at him. Right. But I actually think thinking deeply on even my present circumstances, and not only inviting God into it, but thinking deeply on those circumstances with him is part of that spending time with him. And it's in that, I think, we begin to go, I sort of see what you're doing, God, right? But if we're not doing that, then we don't have that piece of the testimony.
Yeah.
I love that.
You know that this season I've been learning about beholding, like come and behold him, born the King of Angels, and figuring out what does it mean to behold him, to see him for all that he is, and allow him to see me for all that I am, and spend and have that space to really appreciate all that he is.
No, that's good. So they're getting their own testimony. It's not just of what happened in the past, but it's what's going on right now. Then if we move into chapter 4, it says, now when the whole nation had finished crossing the Jordan, the Lord said to Joshua, choose 12 men from among the people, one from each tribe, and tell them to take up 12 stones from the middle of the Jordan, from right where the priests are standing, and carry them over with you and put them down at the place where you stay tonight. And so Joshua called together the 12 men he had appointed from the Israelites, one from each tribe, and said to them, go over before the ark of the Lord your God into the middle of the Jordan. Each of you is to take up a stone on his shoulder, according to the number of the tribes of the Israelites, to serve as a sign among you in the future. When your children ask you, what do these stones mean? Tell them that the flow of the Jordan was cut off before the ark of the covenant of the Lord. And when it crossed the Jordan, the waters of the Jordan were cut off. These stones are to be a memorial to the people of Israel forever. And I had a couple thoughts when I read this. One of them was, every miracle deserves a memorial, right? Anytime God moves, whether it's big or small. In some sense, the idea of a small miracle it's an oxymoron, right?
Yeah.
When the creator of the universe intervenes in the lives of, one of 8 billion people that are orbiting, a middle-sized star on a rock that's a middle-sized, the idea that the creator of the universe knows our names and gets involved, it's crazy, right?
Yeah.
So there's no small miracles. But honestly, this miracle is smaller than the Red Sea miracle. Right? It's not nearly as dramatic. They don't have an enemy. They have an enemy in front of them, but the enemy is not chasing them, right? This is a much smaller body of water. It doesn't collapse in on their enemies and destroy them when it's all said and done. And so you could make the argument this is a quote-unquote smaller miracle. And yet God says, put up a memorial, which he didn't say after the parting of the Red Sea, which I thought was interesting. Now, the parting of the Jordan is memorialized with the building of these stones. And he says this is for when your children ask, right? But here's what I thought was interesting. they build a memorial, and the idea is very clear. Let's remember what God has done, right? And so they build this memorial so that they never forget. But check this out. This is Judges. This is Judges chapter 2, verse 10. Some time has passed. It's hard to say exactly how much time has passed. 50 to 100 years is a decent amount, but it says, after that whole generation had been gathered to their ancestors, another generation grew up who knew neither the Lord nor what he had done for Israel.
Yep.
So they had the memorial.
Right.
They had it, and yet the next generation, and it was for the next generation, but the next generation didn't know why the memorial was there.
Because they weren't telling the stories.
They weren't telling the stories.
Right.
And I just thought that's so interesting. So there's a sense in which, okay, our memory's not enough, right?
Yeah.
We think when God moves, I'm gonna remember this forever, right? Yeah. But I don't think that's true. And so let's just talk about that for a second. Our memory isn't enough. You need a memorial, not a memory, because our memory's not that good, right? No. And so, like, one of the things that we have done as a family that is very literal to this is we built a memorial. We built some standing stones kind of on the edge of our property, which is in a suburban community. I say our property, it's a little postage stamp, but
right.
We piled some rocks up, and there's two of them. They're there because our kids were going off to college, and we had a little ceremony, and we put rocks up, and we talked about what God has done, and the idea is that every time we drive by and see them, we remember them, right?
Yep.
So we've done that,
and when we did that, we gathered the kids, all four of us, out there around that there's a boulder, and then we each had gone around and gotten a rock to put on top. And when we placed our rock on top, each person talked about a way that God has shown up and provided for that person in their life, so that we were telling the stories of God's faithfulness to that person over them. And those are the things they're going to remember when they see those rocks at the edge of our cul-de-sac there.
Well, in theory, right?
Yeah.
But here's the thing, and to your point, they weren't telling the stories. I see those rocks and I remember, right, we put those up because God has been faithful. I don't remember what was said about each rock. Do you?
No.
Yeah.
No.
So I think there is this, a memorial is a good thing, because the memorial alone says, right, God has been faithful, and it's a good reminder of that.
Yep.
But without the telling of the stories, even the memorial begins to lose its meaning, right? Sorry, I'm in my pastor alliteration thing. We've got memory, memorials, and meaning, okay?
You just can't turn it off.
I cannot turn it off. But yeah, without telling the stories, even the memorial actually loses its meaning. And so there's just so much power in stories, right? And I'm going to let you tell the story because I love you, but it's a good story, so I'm a little should I let her or should I just do it? But every Christmas we actually do something where we kind of a memorial, but it's really more about telling the stories. So I'm going to I love you, so I'm going to let you tell the story.
But you can jump in.
I will jump in.
Yes, you can, of course. So usually sometime after Thanksgiving, like the Friday after, I have the tree all set up and all of the boxes of ornaments strewn around the living room. And so you can see all of them. Now, there's every kind of ornament, from the little construction paper ones the kids made with the cotton for the manger and straw and all of those kid ornaments, but there's also the ones that have been gifted to us from other countries, and ones from our partners, from globally, from missionaries from all corners of the world. So there's all kinds of ornaments there, and what we do for sometimes an hour and a half, is we decorate our tree by each of us selecting an ornament that somehow symbolizes a story of how God has shown up and been faithful in our lives during this past year. And some of those stories are fun. They're about friendship. They're about new relationships. They're about jobs and things like that. But inevitably, there have been hard stretches, and we're able to, each person's able to tell a little bit about that hard stretch, but how God has been faithful in that muddy season.
Yeah. I'm not a overly sentimental person, right? I don't have a lot of nostalgia, but that has become a really special time for me, and I think for all of us. And I think it's ultimately it's rooted in this desire to make sure that we don't forget what God has done.
Yep. Yep.
Because it's in the remembering this is what God has done in the past that allows us. You crying? Yeah.
No. Don't make
I'm
fun of
laughing
me.
at your crying. Yeah. It's in this remembering what God has done in the past that gives us courage for the future.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
It's the celebrating God's movement in the past that gives us that courage for the future. And even in those seasons of hard time, and honestly, some of them, even this year, this year's been difficult for our family in a lot of different ways.
Yeah.
And God's been so gracious and he's brought us through it. And we were able to celebrate that even at the memorializing of the building of the tree memorial. I don't know, we've never called it that, but we were able to celebrate God's faithfulness and his provision through those hard seasons. And so it was in some ways it was a heavy time, but there was also a joyful time in it. And I came away from it going, God's good and we're going to be okay, which is not deeply and profoundly theological, but I think at the heart of it, that's the purpose of these memorials, right? It's to be able to go, God's good and we're going to be okay, right?
And honestly, sometimes in our families, being able to say together that God is good and we are going to be okay, that's a major victory. And that is something that needs to be celebrated as well. Yeah. So just a little word about that tradition that we've built. I remember the year that you initiated it. And I remember us both being a little bit nervous about how the kids were going to respond because we're pretty sensitive to being religious and like doing things that are going to make our kids have a lot of church like religious baggage and anything that might appear to be different from our public person is different from our private person that they see at home. We want to make sure that those are always consistent and the same. So we were a little bit nervous about, are the kids going to think this is like religious? And they didn't at all. Yeah. And I think it's because, for one, it was out of the ordinary. It's not something that we make them do every day. And I think that was important. Yeah. And it was also, these are just stories of how Jesus has shown up in our lives.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I'm a pastor. You're engaged in vocational ministry. So our kids were PKs, pastors' kids, and a lot of times there can be such an overload of the whole religious. I think that's the right word that you use. The religious thing that it's almost like you can overdose on it a little bit. I think sometimes, and sometimes pastors will be so worried about making sure their kids grow up to have that faith that they feel like, we just got to do lots and lots of those kinds of things and so it was a real fear. We don't want to do things that are even more religious than the average person because we're already more religious than the average person. But I think you and I were both surprised by how meaningful they found it really early on, right? And now we have a daughter who's married to we have an awesome son-in-law named Josiah, and they're looking to do the same thing, and they're trying to collect the ornaments to do it. So it's surprisingly powerful.
I think it hits at something that God has built into us at our very core. He created us for making monuments and ceremony and tradition, and our culture sometimes pushes that away as we've gone away from some traditional, maybe liturgical practices of church. But he set up Israel to have a system of repetitive feasts where they were to come together and they were to remember his faithfulness, whether it was through the harvest or the firstborn or whatever that looked like, to have a ceremony to commemorate what God has done, so that they have this practice of calling to light, like, you have been faithful. Like, this isn't about how hard we've worked. And I think that that's become, I think our decorating of our tree has become kind of like that, and it's hit on something that God built in us in the very beginning.
Yeah, and we don't have a ton of those, but but we've talked about two. I would say the other one that I think of regularly is, well, at Thanksgiving we typically, not every year, but typically have the prayer time is a little bit more elaborate, and we kind of go around and people are going to share something they're thankful for. I think a lot of families do that, and that's really good.
Yeah.
And if your family's not, that's a really easy way to kind of ease into this, right?
Right.
We do a similar kind of thing with birthdays. Everybody kind of goes around and says something that they appreciate or something that they've seen God do in that person's life or through that person or are seeing, because again, there's that present component to it. So it's not like we have a ton of them, but we do think there's something really powerful. And I think your point about Israel is very well taken because again, it's you experience God moving and you think, I am never going to forget that. And then life takes over. And you kind of do. Right. And so God tells them, I'm going to do something here, and I want you to memorialize it. And says, so the Israelites did as Joshua commanded them. They took 12 stones from the middle of the Jordan, according to the number of the tribes of Israel, as the Lord had told Joshua, and they carried them over with them to their camp, where they put them down. And Joshua set up the 12 stones that had been in the middle of the Jordan at the spot where the priests who carried the Ark of the Covenant had stood, and they are there to this day. And again, they were there to this day at the time of the writing of the book of Joshua. The book of Judges that we read said that generation forgot everything God had done. Some time has passed. It's difficult to know exactly how much time, but I think it's pretty safe to guess that in the Judges verse, the rocks are still there, the stones are still there, but the stories are gone, right? And so, again, it's more about the stories than it is about the stones. It's the stories, I think, and the telling of the stories that matters so much. And so, go ahead.
So I was just reminded that sometimes we think that, like at Thanksgiving, that all of those stories need to be done in prayer, like that we all need to have our heads bowed and like talking to the Lord. Thanks for doing this. Thanks for doing this. And I've realized that whenever we're gathered, God is in our midst. And in Deuteronomy, when he talks about, I want you to tell of these stories of my faithfulness when you're standing and when you're sitting and when you're coming and when you're going, when you're on the road. That's a moving around in life. It's not always like this. So God gets to be famous and gets to be glorified whenever we're telling those stories. It's not just when we are saying, God, thank you for,
Yeah, that's good. Memorials matter because our memory is not good enough. And so we've talked a little bit about some of the things that we do that have been helpful, but honestly, the beginning of this process of remembering and because of what God has done in the past, finding courage for the future, it really begins with knowing what God has done. And so I want to give you a challenge, and that is that as you're in this in-between place where the year is wrapping up, but the next year is about to begin, I want to encourage you to take some time to reflect on what God has done this year. How have you seen God move this year? And what do you see God doing right now, that present thing? And I think sometimes we get in this season of the year and we start thinking, okay, here's my goals for next year. And honestly, your goal for next year, one of your most important goals for next year should be to trust God more. But trusting God more in this coming year is going to start with seeing God and how he's moved in the previous year. And so I want to encourage you to take some time and reflect on what God has done. And then we would love to encourage you to think through, is there a memorial, right? It might be something that is permanent, or it might be something that is transitory, like the prayers you pray on New Year's Day, and you're going to have a new tradition of remembering from the past year, or the way you do your Christmas tree, or something like that. Be creative. But what's the way that we're going to memorialize what God has done? And what's the thing that we're going to do that's going to sort of force us to tell the stories on a regular basis? And maybe there's a commitment as we go into this next year to tell the stories more.
Right.
Because again, it's not the stones, it's the stories that actually keep the memory alive. And so if you don't have anything like that, I want to encourage you to take some time to reflect on what God has done and find some ways to memorialize that allow you to tell the stories, and then be committed to telling those stories within your family, whether that's your your blood family or maybe your life group or your friends. But that commitment to telling the stories is going to be really, really powerful. And I believe it's going to allow you to trust God in a new way as you go into this next new year. So, Merry New Year. Is that what we say? Is that the in between? We love you, and we can't wait to see what God's going to do at Mission Hills this coming year. And we wish you all of the best as you celebrate the start of this new year with the Lord. God bless. We'll see you soon.
So,
Okay.
we got. I think
I
you're
am
starting.
starting.
I was
am
like,
starting.
I'm waiting.
Nope, I'm sorry. Ready?
Yes.
Ready?
This is our 2nd through 5th grade area. In our 2nd through 5th graders, elementary, let me start over. Spit it out, don't worry.
From the top.
Wait, no, I gotta start with hi, hello. Be like, hi. Let me just speak this out loud. You're not recording, right? I'm always recording.
Saw people rise up, use their gift, their God-given gift, in ways that they didn't even think was possible in the church. They're actually like volunteering.
There is very much something to watching something that has been shot on film, and you get a little bit of that grain on that first shot that comes in. It just feels different. It feels warm, and I love it. So
Interesting.
It's good to come back to.
I could not care less.
When you are not talking, do you
Keep looking
at the camera?
You can either look at the camera or the other person.
Yeah.
What would you say?
Go back and forth.
Either, but don't look grumpy, because then that's like super.
Don't drop the smile.
Yeah.
So don't look too fake happy, but also don't look grumpy.
Yeah.
That's my Matt Winter smile right there.
Yeah, there you go.
That wasn't very loud.
And I want to just share what Sonder means. Our producer. Yeah. Yes.
Oh my gosh.
Like you need it at your mouth, not at your neck.
Oh, you're saying it needs to be closer to my mouth. Okay.
She was being sarcastic.
I know. I was like,
That is a true daughter. Well, she would never say that to me.
and I took it meant to be further. I mean, I took the opposite. You actually mean be closer. Okay, sorry. Yeah, no, I didn't either.
Be any farther from your mouth.
And I was like, yes. Yes, it can.
Which is a mom response.
No,
My
like-
kids are always like, Mom, no.
Yes,
No,
it
Mom.
can. No, she wouldn't have said that to you. She's like, hey, Jackie, can you just tilt that a little, please? We got you, Lena. We know you.